How about now, though? Hello? No, you still hear nothing?
I just got to say this. Okay, camera people, I, who have been on video in many different ways.
Hi everyone, it is Tuesday, September 23rd. I'm meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees here with WCNC Charlotte. Thank you for joining us on WCNC Plus for live weather impact. Of course, we're going to start with the local forecast, but with this week being the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Helene, we have a lot of Helene content as well. At some point, Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich is going to be live there up in Fleetwood, North Carolina, and we'll have Chief Meteorologist Tim Buckley from WFMY joining us as well for our coupled discussion, right? So let's start with the forecast today. It was a very, very warm day here in the Queen City. We had an official high temperature of 89 degrees. Another day, upper 80s, lower 90s. Dew point not feeling too bad in the 60s, but certainly could be better. 60s, I would say this time of year, does classify us back in a humid category. Now, temperatures the next few days, we are going to see some big drops, and we're essentially dropping by 3 to 4 degrees every single day. Now, tomorrow, I'm still expecting us to be in the lower 90s. So again, another 90-degree day to tack on to the overall 90-degree days that we've seen so far this year. But eventually we're trending downward, and a lot of this has to do with increasing rain chances by the end of the week. Now, I want to preface this before we get into the semantics of our rain chances, is that this will be nothing like Helene. I know a lot of times when we've had tropical systems this year, we've had rain events, it's kind of giving us a little bit of that weather hurricane anxiety, which is very, very normal. It's been, of course, studied by many psychologists, things like that. But I just want us, as we prepare for that, to know that when we look at some of these numbers, I want you to remember this is nothing like Helene. I know essentially, too, being around the anniversary, things can get a little bit, just concerning, right? It's very, very normal. Satellite radar showing nothing to worry about here locally across the Charlotte area, but we are still tracking some areas of rain, mainly up in the mountains and foothills. And actually earlier, when Colin and Brad were up in the mountains live during our regular newscast, Colin at least saw some rain. I think Brad was clear from any of that. He's also a meteorologist, right? So he can track the radar too. We have some areas of light to moderate rain, southern side of Avery County, as well as greater Burke and Caldwell. And nothing storm-wise, so no lightning strikes, but there are some pockets of heavier rain here. Also on the northern side here of Alexander County, north of Taylorsville, so it's north of Highway 64. You can see some of that action as well. Of course, we can zoom in a little bit closer and you can see a better idea of where this is. So there's Taylorsville. Again, it's on the northern side there of Alexander County, south of Boomer, south of Wilkesboro, but right on the edge there between Wilkes County and Alexander. And then as you make your way over toward here, northern parts of Caldwell, you can see dry toward Globe, Patterson, but some heavier rain toward Pineola area. And again, northern parts of Burke County. Because of where the cold front is that we'll be tracking later on this week, if you see any rain the next 2 days, it is likely going to be for those same mountain and foothill communities. But Thursday and Friday, storms become more widespread to scattered. I don't think everybody is going to see storms, but there's very high confidence that the storms will be scattered on Thursday and Friday. But this is where we start to see the confidence shift as we enter the second half of the weekend. So, wider view here of what's going on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Small chance of rain and storms in the mountains today and tomorrow, and then storm potential on Thursday. Again, I'm not so much concerned about the strong storm potential. I really want us to hone in on the rainfall itself, because not only, again, are we tracking rain for the first time in quite some time, but when you're in drought conditions or very dry conditions, the first rain, oftentimes you'll get what essentially is like an oily, slick residue that will happen on the ground because of all of that rain that we've been lacking. And also, when the rain has been lacking and we're in drier conditions, yes, we can see the rain eventually percolate through the soil, but it takes a while to do so. It's not right immediate. We know that. And so, sorry, James, I didn't mean to clap and scare you.
She clapped and I jumped.
But so it takes a while for it to percolate through the soil. So if you get heavy rain after drought conditions, it will run off quicker, similar to a saturated ground. So what you want, right, is light rain, over a prolonged period of time. Unfortunately, that's not what we're going to see in this case. So Thursday, Friday, areas of scattered rain. That I'm not concerned about. But what happens afterwards, this is the thing that we're watching very closely. That same cold front stalls off the coastline, and how far south it stalls or how close it stalls to the Carolinas will depend on how it interacts with two areas of low pressure that eventually are going to be trying to form just off the coast. As of right now, most of our models keep these lows offshore, but the closer they get, impacts, of course, near the coast, and a higher chance that that would result in some rainfall. I want to show you some model comparison here. We have three most reliable forecast models: the graph, the GFS, the Euro. They're in very good agreement through Friday morning that we're looking at about a quarter of an inch to about an inch or so at a maximum. Only the GFS and the Euro go out further than that. But notice the big change in confidence levels by the second half of the weekend. We're looking at upwards of 3.5 inches of rain versus a maximum of 1 to 2. And so that's a pretty big spread when it comes to some of those, rain chances being higher versus lower. And again, a lot of that has to do with how close those lows are to the coast. And again, early next week, not only could that be a Sunday, Monday influence to the rain, but it also could expand into Tuesday and Wednesday as well. So the areas that are what's complicating the forecast, so to speak, are these two areas shaded in orange and red. Now we know the area in red will likely become our next named storm, which is Umberto. It has a high chance over the next 7 days of development. But even if the one in orange doesn't actually form into a named storm, again, all of that low pressure energy will have an influence on the forecast. It's just how much it will influence the forecast, it's still a big question mark. So again, if we have any named storms, next storm name up on the list is Umberto. We are behind on named storms and hurricanes so far this season compared to average, but Umberto, Imelda, Jerry are the next 3 on the list. And of course, we know here in the Carolinas, I think Umberto being the one that's further away would be positive, since a lot of our H names have been just a pain in the booty, for lack of a better term. We get a lot of questions this time of year on this specifically, so I just wanted to talk about it real quick before we bring in Brad and Tim. But there are questions that happen every time there's 2 storms nearby. That's like, can they form together? Do they just go boom and just become one? Not necessarily, but what will happen is 2 areas of low pressure, 2 tropical storms, 2 hurricanes, whatever it is, they essentially will pivot almost like they're dancing around each other, and eventually one is stronger and will take the energy from the other. Now, right now, it looks like a good thing that it would likely be Umberto, again, the one that's further away, that could be stronger, because typically that's the one that takes the energy. So again, you want the one that's stronger to be the one that's further away from us. So we'll talk a lot more about that, of course, coming up in the coming days. More details as well tomorrow. Essentially, the closer we get to the weekend, the better data we have. Here's your Jerry Hunt Super Center 7-day forecast. Say that 5 times fast. Areas of rain again Thursday and Friday, and then really big question marks heading into the weekend and early next week. We'll leave the 7-day forecast up for you, but we'll be back in 2 minutes with Tim and Brad. We'll see you then. Welcome back, everybody, to WCNC Plus. We are here on Live Weather Impact. To join me is going to be Chief Meteorologist Tim Buckley from WFMY, and of course our Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich up in the mountains. We are into another day of continuing coverage on Hurricane Helene. Of course, we know the anniversary is coming up on Saturday when it impacted the Carolinas. We do want to quickly show you where Helene was this time last year. So on September 23rd, you can see it was a potential tropical cyclone. That is the name, or I guess before the name that happens from the National Hurricane Center. They call it a potential tropical cyclone if they want to issue watches and warnings before the storm is expected to actually become a depression or a named storm. Really, the forecast overall, the cone, didn't change much from this. It was a very, very good forecast from the NWS and the NHC. And this is kind of the time that I know I can speak for myself and Brad, of course, because we were in the Weather Center at WCNC, really starting to get concerned about the rain risk and, of course, the flooding risk, since we were already seeing rain from the predecessor rain event that caused Helene to be so bad. Again, we're going to bring in Tim and Brad here. Brad, you were up in Fleetwood today. You've been doing coverage of the mountains the last few days. What was specific to bring you to Fleetwood today on Tuesday?
Well, Fleetwood was an area I came to about a week and a half after the storm, and we started in Todd, which is, if you don't know where Todd is, it's basically right on the Watauga-Ashe County line. Fleetwood is about halfway between the Watauga County line and West Jefferson. So it's a small community. It's on the New River. The New River is an amazing stretch of water. It actually flows north into Virginia, so it flows not out of the mountains but back north into Virginia. And what people know about the New River, if you have never been up here, it's a very calm, tranquil, wide river that a lot of people float on. And floats, if you don't know what that are, you get your inner tubes, everybody kind of goes together and they drift downstream. They also kayak, fly fish, and canoe. But what's interesting, there's this little area where people get out. They go upstream, they float, and if you've ever done this, you know what I'm talking about. And then you get out and you get picked back up and taken back to your car. Well, that area is right where this church is behind me. And this church is called the New River Calvary Church. Now, it's a famous church in Fleetwood because it is one of only 2 churches in the whole town, and it's 101 years old, and it survived the flood of 1940. But as you can see, the beautiful stained glass windows are not seen right now because they're actually boarded up. It's been boarded up since Helene. The damage was pretty extensive, and they basically are going to move the church. Yesterday I talked about a church that was being raised. This church is actually being picked up and moved uphill out of the floodplain. So I'll get out of the way, and up here is going to kind of pan over there. It's going to get moved back there out of the floodplain, and it's going to expand. Now, the reason I mentioned the floats and the kayaks, because this church is known to people that don't even go to it, because if you've ever done one of those floats, this is where you get out, and the church actually has an area across the street where there's a big parking lot, stairs out of the river, and a porta-john. And the pastor we talked to today told me why that porta-john was so important. He's like, there's tons of bathrooms upstream in Todd, but there was none down here. They saw a problem. So they actually donated that, and they allow people to get out of the water and use that porta-john. But the pastor, Roger Perry, we talked to him today, and he was super excited about the fact that yes, they had damage, but they're going to be able to move this church. And part of the, I guess, the silver lining of this, guys, is being able to move the church could end up allowing them to expand their congregation. Because the church is in a floodplain right now, they weren't able to expand. They weren't allowed to build anywhere in the floodplain. But because they're moving it up there, they're going to be able to expand it. And he talked a little bit about being able to move it and what they're going to do in the future.
Well, we're planning to actually move the 101-year-old sanctuary back out of the floodplain and then add on to it.
Okay.
Where we will build back better than what we were. We are going to have a major campaign Sunday with the people in the church to have them make commitments. The plan is to tear down the fellowship hall here. Mm-hmm. It was completely flooded all the way up to the ceiling.
Yeah.
And the sanctuary sits a little higher, obviously, and it got up about 4 or 5 feet in the sanctuary.
Wow.
Ruined the baby grand piano and the organ. All the books and everything, they're all gone.
Yeah, so Roger was very, very forthcoming about what their plans were, what they're looking forward to. They still need some money. He said they're putting in God's hands because they don't know where all the money's going to come from right now. They haven't even got a contractor yet. Somebody in the town, the trustee Fred, was actually helping clear the land. And that's one thing I'll tell you guys about Fleetwood. Since we've been here, Pierre, my photographer, we've been here. We've had people stop by and ask us, do you need us to get the pastor? Do you want to talk to us? And we just had a woman stop by who was super excited that we were here, and it was kind of the reason we're in these small towns, guys. It was great to hear. She was like, I'm just glad you guys are here telling the story of Fleetwood, because she came down because her friend saw that Fleetwood was on TV today at 4, 5, and 6 on our station. So she drove down to say hey and thank you for talking about the small towns. And Fleetwood's just one of many small towns across the Western Carolinas impacted, and they still have a long ways to go. We saw someone today who told us, a local, that they're about 90% back, but it's that 10% that could take several more years to finish up. And so there's still that percentage that has to be done. So Tim, a lot of relief still going on up here, some good stories, but also, boy, there's a long way to go. And the tropics are heating up now, and obviously everybody up here is definitely glued to what's happening in the tropics. They do not want to see another storm anytime soon.
Yeah, sure. Brad, you make such a great point. It's always good to be prepared. And this time of year, September, as we know, we talk about it almost every day. There's some sort of hurricane anniversary in the Carolinas. This is the time of year that we really have to be on our toes. And we are seeing some signs that the tropics could be creating a few more storms over the next couple of days. It's always good for us to be prepared, of course, as citizens in the Carolinas as we get ready for whatever might come our way. But it's also really important that we have emergency crews that are always prepared as well. That really includes firefighters, and Jesse Pierre was able to chat with the Cove Creek Firefighter Department and see what they did to prepare for Hurricane Helene last year.
It was worse than we anticipated, but we knew it was going to be bad.
Cove Creek Fire Chief Steve Marks says he saw the warning signs on the weather models and called his crew in early. Preparation, he says, was their first line of defense against a storm.
To make sure that we have the infrastructure and the equipment that we need.
He says preparedness also starts at home.
If our volunteers aren't prepared at home, they're not going to be able to respond. Or if they're here, they're not going to be comfortable about their loved ones being alone at home.
When the storm arrived, he watched Highway 321 vanish underwater.
Instead of seeing cars drive down the road, we saw debris. We saw outbuildings.
For days, the fire station was without power after it was hit by a landslide.
When the hill slid down, it took our propane tank with it, which disconnected the gas line to the generator, which caused the generator to stop. Boom, no electricity.
When the signal went dark, they figured out other ways to get power.
One of our fire trucks has got an onboard generator, so we were using it to recharge radios, to recharge the flashlights.
For days, the community was cut off.
The problem was, for the next, say, 72 hours, if people needed help, they couldn't call. They had no cell service. And so we quickly moved into, let's evaluate where we think the greatest damage is, send our UTV, send our pickup truck out, and make sure these folks are okay.
The chief says the biggest lesson is simple. Be prepared and lean on each other.
Perhaps the greatest success story that came out of this was that community involvement, that in the face of this tragedy, this huge crisis, neighbor helping neighbor.
Because when disasters strike, it's the community that keeps you going. Jesse Pierre, WCNC Charlotte.
And just like Steve was saying there, it's so important to have a plan and to be prepared. And the emergency services are better at it than anybody. But keep in mind, it's always good for you and your family to have these type of plans, especially during hurricane season. And our biggest threats are with flooding in the inland Carolinas. Brittany, we talk about the firefighters, the EMTs. There are so many heroes to recognize in situations like this. I know you had the chance to talk with some of the forecasters at the National Weather Service.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing too, right? Sometimes I think that we talk a lot about emergency responders and the forecasters, maybe not that they're not talked about, but they kind of get sent to the back of our head, right? Because it's different being on the front line versus being the people who are trying to prepare folks ahead of time. But it's important for the forecasters, not just here, in the weather centers of your local TV stations, but also at our National Weather Service offices, to make sure that they're prepared as well, because it can impact them too. In this particular area, when it came to Helene, a lot of the National Weather Service coverage was by Greenville Spartanburg, which is the same coverage area for most of the Charlotte metro. We have a really great reputation, connection right with them, as he's worked with them for a long time. And so I had the pleasure really of talking to their warning coordination meteorologist, whose name is Trisha Palmer. You might have seen her on our TV station many times talking about storms, but she kind of went through the human impact, how it was to be in the offices, right, covering the storm before, during, and after. She also has a unique situation too, where her husband is the hydrologist at the office. So, working hand in hand together obviously can create extra elements when it comes to that, personalization of the forecast and being prepared. They have kids. And again, I think it's important to remember that they're people too. And listening to their stories and hearing her tell the stories of when they learned certain things, it really brought even me back to us being here at WCNC Charlotte, thankfully safe, right, in the building. But it was a very hard storm to cover. So hopefully you'll enjoy listening to their stories too.
I don't ever want to have something like this have to come out of our office again.
Trisha Palmer is the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service in Greenville Spartanburg. She told me they had a job to do, their best to keep people safe.
We were saying we plead with you to take these warnings seriously. This is going to be the worst event of the modern era. This person called a family member in the mountains and read it word for word to this family member. And this family member said, okay, I'll leave. And so the family with 3 kids left. These lives were saved because of this message.
The NWS uses many partners in order to send out information, such as local media, amateur radio operators, emergency management officials, and first responders. These connections are imperative when covering big storms. But knowing the devastation about to unfold, Palmer says they were some of the hardest phone calls to make.
Catastrophic doesn't describe what's about to happen to you. And the emergency manager who told me that said that was earth-shattering for him. What's worse than catastrophic?
The team continued to work with local officials throughout the storm. But remember, these are local teams who were also impacted but continued working to help people. All of it impacting their mental health too.
And I'm driving in, and it took me an hour to get into work, navigating around trees. And then there's a tree that falls down that I see fall down. And there's cars with trees on them. And a thought passed through my mind, what am I doing? A tree could fall on my car and my kids could lose their mom.
Helene is a storm no one will ever forget, including this office. It was a defining moment for many of the forecasters.
The reports coming in and we're starting to hear about the death toll and the loss of life. At first it was shocking and numb, thinking, is this really happening? Is this, because you're always wondering, when is the worst going to happen? When is the event going to happen?
So originally, I actually interviewed Trisha because I was going to do a story specifically on NWS, what lessons learned, what they thought they did well, and what, kind of improvements are looking to be made. But talking to Trisha and hearing so much of the human impact that it had on her and the other folks in the office, I actually pivoted and decided to just do an extra story, right, focusing on them. There was a lot more stories that she told me, talking to the emergency manager, there's the catastrophic flooding. But one unique thing as well that we got to do was talk to Clay Cheney, which is actually the social media manager for the office. And he's the one that, if you remember kind of the infamous, I would say, public information statement that they sent out, as well as posted on social media, it started with catastrophic flooding and landslides for the mountains and foothills from Hurricane Helene. I got to talk to Clay about his mindset really while writing this, and the really big thing that he said was he wanted to make sure that they were doing everything they could to get the information out. He felt like we were doing a great job media-wise, right, of trying to disseminate, get that information out. He felt like, the emergency management officials were doing what they could, but his thing that he felt like they could do better, and again, as the social media manager, was he started posting these on Facebook, because he said there's a lot of small communities, a lot of people in these areas who maybe don't have satellite, don't have antenna, things like that. A lot of them were getting their information on social media, and that story that Trisha talks about in her the story, Tim, about the people who called and told them that they were able to get the family out with the 3 kids was because they saw the Facebook post and they literally called their family members and just read the post word for word, and they were able to convince their family members to leave. So I think it's important to remember too on our side, Tim, that everywhere you can post it, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, I don't know, even Reddit, like that is so important to try to do your best to get the information out by really all means possible. And so it was nice to talk to Trisha kind of on her thoughts and their feelings as well covering the storm.
And not just posting it in all of those places, but, I think the words that they chose to use and the way they communicated it, and you're really speaking in plain English, right, is so important. We can show you numbers. We can show you what we love to do is put out a river gauge or something and show you how high the river is going to rise. If you just say it's going to be catastrophic flooding, there are going to be a ton of landslides, and it's going to be worse than this, that, and the other storm that you remember from before, that's very effective communication. And I just remember when they put that out, I reshared it to my page, even here in the Piedmont, which isn't even super close to the mountains where they were hit so badly. And it went viral. And I'm hopeful that that got to a lot of people that lived there too, and they saw that and they read it. But I think, it's important for everyone to remember, if you know something that's going to be really, really bad, us as forecasters, we need to get that message out as urgently and using as clear messaging as we possibly can. And so big kudos to them. That definitely saved lives just from the choice of words. I mean, it's really important, the power of words that you can put down on paper and get in front of people, in this case digitally.
Yeah, I actually asked Clay as well, the social media manager who wrote the post. And of course, there were a lot of people who looked at it before it went out. He didn't just go rogue. But he said that if he could give people any advice about these storms in particular, it would be once you're getting historical context. So once you're starting to see comparisons to previous floods, whether it's from a tropical system, from, of course, 1940, 1916, he's like, anytime that you see a post referencing historical context, that's when you need to really be paying attention. I thought that was an interesting thing. You don't hear that often from them, but historical context, again, that's kind of the tag that he said you should be paying extra attention with these storms.
Right. And we're not always able to do that or make those comparisons. But, to think of a hypothetical, what if there was a storm that was coming into Charlotte and they said this is going to be worse than Hugo? Yeah, people would take that seriously for sure. But you better make sure you're right when you're saying that. And they were right on the money with this one. And like we said, it saved a lot of lives.
Yeah, it certainly did. Well, of course, we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, with a lot more Hurricane Helene coverage on the 1 year later as the approaching anniversary comes this weekend. Tim, thanks for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow. And, of course, Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich will be back, too.